Music intertwines with aspects of American social and cultural identity, including through social class, race and ethnicity, geography, religion, language, gender, and sexuality. The relationship between music and race is perhaps the most potent determiner of musical meaning in the United States. The development of an African American musical identity out of disparate sources from Africa and Europe has been a constant theme in the music history of the United States. African American musical styles became an integral part of American popular music through blues, jazz, rhythm and jazz, and then rock and roll, soul, and hip-hop. All of these styles were consumed by Americans of all races, but were created in African American styles and idioms before eventually becoming common in performance and consumption across racial lines. The blues is a genre of African American folk music that is basis for much of modern American popular music. Blues became a part of pop music in the 1920s when classic female blues singers like Bessie Smith and a male singer like Lester Young grew popular. By the end of the 1940s, however, pure blues was only a minor part of popular music, having been subsumed by offshoots like rhythm and blues and the nascent rock and roll style. Lester Willis Young, also known as Prez, was an American jazz tenor saxophonist and clarinetist. He became a jazz legend, inventing or popularizing much of the hipster ethos which came to be associated with music. Bessie Smith, sometimes referred to as the Empress of the Blues, Smith was the most popular female blues singer of the 1920s and 30s. She is often regarded as one of the greatest singers of her era, and along with Louis Armstrong, a major influence on subsequent jazz vocals. Jazz is a music genre that originated at the beginning of the 20th century in African American communities in southern United States, from a confluence of African and European music traditions. Jazz started out with a combination of multiple types of music. Its roots date back to the 1880s with African organ. It started with one African American man who knew his path in life well. He became popular for his new world of unwritten music, Louis Armstrong. Armstrong was considered the first real jazz musician. Gossip spread around New Orleans of Armstrong, and the results were dramatic. Every African in America were taught to read music and play it. This became known as the Jazz Era. This lasted more than 20 years from its birth date, and boom for fashion advertisements and concert tickets dramatically increased. A few decades later, jazz still had an effect, and one of the most famous singers in the 1950s and 60s would be Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra released hit albums for half a century. His career began to take off when he was singing in swing bands led by Harry James and Tommy Dorsey. Sinatra endured all the changes in pop music from the mid-1940s to the early 90s. From the end of the big band era into and then past the rock and roll age into the age of hip-hop. Frank Sinatra and his contribution to the pop music is still praised today. Rock and roll originated and evolved in the United States during the late 1940s and early 1950s, primarily from a combination of the blues, country music, and gospel music. Rock and roll began achieving wide popularity in the early 1960s. The massive popularity and eventual worldwide view of rock and roll gave it a widespread social impact. Chuck Berry sang "Hail, Hail, Rock and Roll, Deliver Me from the Old Days." And that's exactly. Rock and roll in the United States was influenced by the British band The Beatles. And one big-time rock and roll artist that emerged under the influence of the Beatles was none other than Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley, also referred to as the King of Rock and Roll, or simply the King. Presley is regarded as one of the most important figures of the 20th century pop culture. He had a versatile voice and usually wide success, encompassing many genres, including country, pop ballads, gospel, and the blues. He's the best-selling solo artist in the history of pop music and is found today in the Music Hall of Fame. Music has been around for quite a while, but it hit its peak after World War I. People looked for a way to escape the reality and turn to the pop culture. Since the 1950s, pop has been a smashing hit to this very day and will continue for the years to come.